then. Now. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, Nigel, you are audible.
Ah, excellent. Thank you. Sorry about that. I just had some trouble with two meetings running like the same link, I think opened in WebEx, but also on a web browser. So there was a bit of confusion. So I apologize for that.
No, it's totally fine.
No, thanks, Saraf. How are you?
Yeah, I am good. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
So would you like me to start sharing and kick off, or how would you like to proceed from here?
Yeah. Can you please wait for a moment because Professor Shiva yet to join. He will
That's
be joining
perfectly
soon.
fine. I thought I was running late. So I originally thought I had another 20 minutes. So I was just sort of doing, just getting stuff ready. But then what time did you want me to start talking? At 9:30, is that right?
Yeah. Actually, Professor Shiva joined earlier, but I think some problem is there from his side. He will be joining soon. I have been informed already.
No worries. That's good to know. So look, I'm flexible. I'm here all afternoon, so it's all good.
Thank you.
All
Thank you.
morning. Yeah. Swarp, are you still there?
Dr. Nigel, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, you can.
I can. I'm sorry, I was muted temporarily. How are you?
Sorry that Shivanagendra sir is not able to join the meeting due to some technical issues. So he'll be joining shortly.
Thank you. Yeah,
So
no
in the
worries.
meantime, we can start the lecture. I will tell a brief introduction about the lecture and about the speaker also, and then you can share your PPT, sir.
Thanks so much. Just wondering, is it Lashmi? Is that right? Am I saying your name right? Lashmi?
Lakshmi.
Lakshmi? Sorry, I just wanted to know, when I share screen, like, am I able to share short videos? Is that possible to share audio? Is there an option in WebEx or? It doesn't matter. It's not critical, but sometimes when you share audio or when you share a video, the sound doesn't come through unless you choose certain options at the start. But that's okay. We don't have to share audio and video, but as in, like a video from a website. But it's fine. We'll see how we go when we get there.
Sir, couldn't
Thanks,
hear
Lakshmi.
your query, sir. There were some problems.
I think you can introduce Mr. Nigel and let me start the lecture.
Yes, sir. I'll introduce the speaker and then we'll start this.
Yes.
So everyone, welcome to AQML lectures. This is lecture number 57. This is organized as a part of CEPHA network. And today's talk is by Dr. Nigel Godman. Dr. Nigel Godman is a senior research fellow in air quality and health based in HEAL Global Research Center, Health Research Institute, University of Canberra. With a background in environmental engineering and physical chemistry, his research focuses on reducing human exposure to sources of indoor and outdoor air pollution, such as fine particulate matter and volatile organic compounds. Nigel is an active member of the Center for Safe Air, CSA, and the Healthy Environments and Lives, HEAL, National Research Network, where he helps to address the impacts of air pollution associated with climate and environmental change on human health. Nigel is a former recipient of a Vice Chancellor's postdoctoral fellowship from RMIT University, and he collaborates with colleagues from RMIT's Post-Carbon Research Center. Nigel also holds a honorary position at CSIRO Environment, where he works closely with leading air quality scientists. He has published journal articles on topics that include indoor air quality, low-cost sensor application, air pollution exposure reduction, material and product emissions, desalination, and water recycling. Today's talk is titled Volatile Emissions from Consumer Products and the Implications for Air Quality and Health. The talk will present findings from recent studies on volatile emissions from fragrance consumer products and the implications for air quality and health. It will also discuss strategies that can help reduce exposures to emissions from fragrance consumer products, improve indoor air quality, and potentially improve health. We welcome you, sir, for the talk.
Thank you so much for that warm introduction, Lakshmi. I will share screen now so you can see my slides, and please let me know if you can't see things that so I'm thinking I'm wanting screen 1. So that's the one I share. How does that look? Okay, can you see that okay?
Yes, sir, we can see your presentation.
Thank you. Lakshmi, how much time do you want me to talk for? Is it half an hour, 40 minutes, or is it 45 minutes? How long would you like me to talk for?
I have a talk for 45 minutes and 15 minutes for question answer interactions.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that. Alrighty. Well, thanks again for the opportunity to talk to you today and to share the research, my research journey and some of my research over the last, I guess, 10 years. This all kicked off for me, this field of work, when I started my PhD at the University of Melbourne. I previously worked at CSIRO for 15 years in water-related research. So that's the reference to desalination and water treatment that I think Lakshmi kindly mentioned in publications. Very much industry-focused research back at CSIRO. Much more sort of in terms of when I started my PhD, it was still very applied research, but more focused on air quality rather than water quality. So moving my elements. I'll move into fire next. So thanks again for letting me talk to you today, for inviting me to be here. I'd just like to, in Australia, we acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which we're calling from. And so in that tradition, I'll just like to dedicate today's talk to the traditional custodians of Australia, which are the Aboriginal people that have been on the country for over 60,000 years. So key priority for the research we do in the Healthy Environments and Lives Network is really integrating first people's tradition and knowledge and their wisdom into Western science. So in that spirit, we commit to building a sustainable future together. So moving on, just a bit of an overview of the slides are a little slow to update, so I'm just pressing the button and waiting for it. There we go. So I'd just like to just briefly touch on the HEAL network, the Healthy Environments and Lives Network, then give a bit of a background into the topic of today, the indoor air quality VOC, consumer products and materials, and some research findings. Then we'll have some questions and discussion towards the end. So just kicking off into the HEAL network, it was developed and it's led by Professor Satiris Vatilakis from the University of Canberra. Many of you have probably met Satiris. He's definitely one of the great collaborators and researchers of our country, and very, very impressed by everything that he's leading in HEAL, and very honoured to be working with him. So the NHMRC funded a research grant that Satiris led, special initiative into human health and environmental change. And essentially that was really to look at, it aims to protect and improve public health, but the vision and strengthen health system resilience and also reduce inequities and inequalities. So the vision of HEAL is to catalyze research, knowledge exchange and translation into policy and practice. So it's really about trying to get the best available evidence out there and translate it into usable health outcomes that improve health and environment for all. So in that respect, I'm going to show you a brief overview of a project that was recently completed that sits within one of HEAL's themes. So HEAL has an overarching governance structure, but it's guided by Indigenous knowledge, data decision support, and science communication. These overarching themes. There's a whole range of communities of practice and advisory committees. I'm actually part of the Victorian. One of our states is called Victorian Community of Practice, where we really try to engage with local people, local researchers, people in the field, people on the ground, to look at what their needs are and help address local priorities. So it's meant to really be a diverse network. It's got over 200 people involved, research institutions, agencies, NGOs. So to really try and deliver action on important issues related to health systems, bushfires, air pollution, food and water science or food and water security, biosecurity, urban health. It's another area that I work in, looking at how we can make our new cities, our future cities, low carbon, more efficient, healthier in terms of indoor air quality, looking at equity issues around housing. We also look at rural and remote health and at-risk populations. So we address a range of priorities, have a range of actions, which we're building an observatory, which allows a whole lot of important health-related environmental data to be put into one location so people can access that and use that for their research. And it's a really impressive body of work that's coming together. So HEAL, in terms of the HEAL project that I want to share with you, this is recently finished, this project on we call it 10 things we can do, developing air pollution, exposure reduction and lung health advice for people with asthma. It was called the Healthy Air Project. and it had Indigenous knowledge and engagement at its core. It involved working closely with Arabic and Arabic communities and Aboriginal communities to really listen to what their needs were in terms of air quality resources to protect them from exposure to just sort of landscape fire and other forms of smoke. So this amazing artwork here represents, the air quality, the Indigenous heritage that Australian Aboriginal people have, and sort of that connection to land and country. So that was done by Tala Laurie, that piece of art. So we conducted a systematic review looking at the best available evidence for exposure reduction. There's a cost-benefit analysis research paper coming out of that as well. And subsequently, a whole lot of engagement with Aboriginal and Arabic communities was done by the team. So fact sheets, infographics, online resources were the outcome, journal articles, obviously, and ideally, resources that people can use to improve their health outcomes. So I guess this is an example of that translation work that HEAL is aiming to achieve. So you can see these were the fact sheets we promoted or developed and promoted with support from the University of Tasmania Centre for Safe Air, Dr. Bill Dodd, really trying to help people understand what they can do to reduce their exposure to landscape fire smoke. That could be, in our country, we call bushfires or wood smoke, prescribed burning, could be stubble haze smoke, any kind of smoke-related pollution. So these I guess recommendations and advice is some of the outcomes that we really wanted to offer. So moving on to today's talk, I just wanted to give an overview of the HEAL, the sort of ethos of HEAL and where some of the work we do sits, and also invite you to our. I should just go back. Invite you to our conference. Every year we have an annual conference. On one of the earlier slides, there was a link to some of our Twitter handle and our other social tags here. So I encourage you to have a look at that and warmly invite you to attend the conference later I think it's in November this year. So with that, without any further talk of just where we are, but just more about the project at hand or the topic at hand, we know air pollution is an important, a very important, significant issue. Millions of people every year are impacted and die from exposure to air pollution. Indoor air pollution also has a significant effect on our health. We know there's no safe level of exposure to air pollution. So these are the drivers for our research. So we know of many sources outdoors. These are very familiar to all of us, I'm sure. So we have our typical industry, electricity generation from coal. Prescribed burning is quite common in our country regarding reducing the hazard of big bushfires by actually doing some burning around areas that are potentially highly combustible. So prescribed burning is becoming a difficult thing to do, but an important thing to still do. Dust storms, wood heaters are a significant source of air quality or air pollution, and they impact air quality in many urban areas and rural areas across the country. Agriculture, things like nitrogen dioxide, ammonia from fertilizers, farm machinery, livestock, generation of methane. Another important one is the generation of ground level ozone. So we recognize all of these outdoor sources, but I guess they're not the only source of pollution and not the only source of pollution that we're exposed to. So I'm really interested in indoor air quality and indoor environments because we do spend most of our time inside. So there's no formal definition of IAQ. However, we can consider it, or the definition of the way I like to think about it is air quality in the buildings that can impact our comfort, health, and well-being. So typical indoor environments, at least in Australia, we think of houses, caravans, schools, offices, public buildings like libraries, restaurants, and in forms of transport, trains, buses, cars. It doesn't include occupational environments. So, factories are not so much considered indoor environments. They're regulated under occupational work safe guidelines. So indoor air quality in Australia is at the moment unregulated and unmonitored. Well, it's becoming more monitored since COVID, but there's no formal regulations, although that is actually a rapidly changing space. When I started my work in this area 10 years ago, the previous NHMR, National Health and Medical Research Council guidelines were rescinded. They'd done some work to build them, but then back in 2002, I think they'd been rescinded. And so the effort of people in the indoor air quality community, for instance, led by Professor Lydia Morawska, the efforts have really tried to build the momentum around bringing back or having some guidelines for indoor air quality around certain pollutants. So indoor air quality, what do we think about? I'm very interested in VOCs, volatile organic compounds, a group of chemicals which do impact indoor air quality. There is a definition of VOCs that's quite specific. If you look at the WHO definition, it's defined around the boiling point of the different compounds, whether they're semi-volatile, volatile, or very volatile. So formaldehyde is technically not a VOC, but we'll include it as a VOC for today, just for the discussion. We have, semi-volatiles such as musks and phthalates, really important compounds as well, with known health impacts. We're not looking at them today, but just wanting to flag that these are known or indoor pollutants. Inorganic gases, carbon monoxide, NO2, ozone, biological sources. We're very familiar with what a virus can do for indoor air quality and the risk of exposure. Particulates from combustion, cooking, in our country, radiation or radon infiltration is not such a problem. Very, very old geographically, Australia. You may have noticed the map of Australia up earlier in the presentation. It's a big arid core. Australia is very, very, very old geologically. It's compared to places like Europe, and I imagine India as well is probably very. I don't know if radon is an issue over there. I'd love to hear from you. Pesticides, chlorinated compounds, bleach, chlorinated water, perchloroethylene. So these are indoor pollutants that we are potentially exposed to, and heavy metals from lead. Lead paint was quite popular or quite common in Australia sometime up until the early, I think, 70s. I'm not sure when it was phased out, but yeah, certainly these are potential agents or sources or pollutants in homes, in buildings, and in indoor locations. So I've talked about the type of indoor locations. VOCs are important indoor pollutants. Some are hazardous, and they're actually regulated under the National Environmental Protection Measure and the NEPM in Australia. So they're regulated outdoors, but not indoors. So important and major sources of VOCs are building materials, such as laminated timber products, plastics, paints. Well, that's a building product. Paints and carpets, potentially furnishings, are all potential sources of VOCs, and consumer products. And that's going to sort of lead us into the talk today around consumer products, and in particular those with a fragrance component. So we'll talk more broadly about just exposure in the built environment. In terms of VOCs, because we spend so much time indoors, because there are many sources of VOCs around us all the time, because of these reasons, our exposure to them happens mostly indoors. So indoor air quality, as I mentioned, in many countries is unregulated. There is has been some great work done in several countries. I think Health Canada has implemented guidelines in Canada. Some states in the US have guidelines. France has indoor air quality guidelines, and quite a detailed program for assessment of some buildings like schools. So I think there is great examples out there we can learn from. Emissions from consumer products and building materials are generally not monitored. We sort of don't think to monitor them because maybe we don't think that they're potentially a problem. Hazardous air pollutants are not regulated indoors, but they are regulated outdoors. So some of the effects that can be due to exposure to VOCs include asthma, fevers, congestion, nausea, blurred vision. So depending on your sensitivity, I guess, the individual sensitivity to a particular chemical or odor or gas, these are a range of reported sort of health effects that we note from national studies, but also from some epidemiological studies as well. In terms of economics, so many years ago, Dr. Stephen Brown from CSIRO estimated that exposure to poor indoor air quality, not just from VOCs, but from all kinds of sources, particulates, other inorganic gases, VOCs inclusive, was around 12 billion. I've adapted that in today's money. It's around $22 billion a year, at least, in terms of lost productivity. We know that human labor is an expensive part of any building, and improvements in indoor air quality can boost productivity and cognitive function. So there's a really good reason to make indoor air quality as good as it can be from an economic point of view, but as it affects health and the economy. A 1% improvement in productivity could cover the energy costs for a year. Now, that is an old reference. So with today's cost of energy, I'd have to re-look at that one. But yeah, I think that's an interesting comparison in terms of the small amount that potentially you could spend on something to actually, to make great savings. So personal activities that might expose you to VOCs, things like smoking and vaping, would be pretty obvious, I guess. But I'll talk a little bit more about vaping later. Hobbies and crafts, burning candles, often are considered to be something people do to relax, but they do emit a range of particulates, ultrafine particles, and VOCs, CO2, a range of pollutants. And if you're indoors, those pollutants can build up, primary and secondary pollutants as well. So from the candle and from the combustion. An attached garage. It's a lot of people love the idea of an attached garage. You drive into your house via the garage, and you walk through from the garage into the building. If that's not well sealed, or if there's not some kind of extraction in the garage, you can get emissions from the petrol and the oil and the other hydrocarbons in the vehicle coming into the house. So it needs to be thought about when houses are designed. I think Health Canada, Dr. Amanda Wheeler has done some great work there to really bring that to the fore in Health Canada. There are regulations to make sure that garages, attached garages, are actually is adequately ventilated. Cooking, I think there's no surprise there that cooking involves quite a lot of particulates and volatile emissions, and how we manage that's important. Combustion-related appliances, chlorinated water. As important as it is to have chlorination for hygiene and biological control, obviously, it can be a source of chlorinated products when washing and using water. Cleaning, vacuuming, dusting, obviously, you can think about many other sources. These are not sort of new to most people here. There's a great little YouTube video here about the study in the US, the house observations of microbial and environmental chemistry. I really like this. So if I share the slides, perhaps you can have a look at it in your own time, given in the interest of time today. And I'm not sure if I can actually share the video. So if we have time at the end, we might come back, but it's just a nice video about indoor chemistry, the great work that the group are doing, and some of the detailed secondary reaction, or the detail around the secondary reaction products that can form, just doing everyday things like cooking, cleaning, and being indoors. So today, I'd like to just reflect on a few studies that I've either led or contributed to. The first is looking at indoor VOCs at an Australian university. That university was Melbourne University in Parkville, Victoria, where I studied my PhD. The second study is really looking at clothes dryer emissions, looking at the emissions released from a residential clothes dryer during use of different types of detergents. So we had two types of detergents, which we looked at, same brand, if you like, but different categories. So one had a strong fragrance in it, and the other one had no fragrance in it. So that was an intervention we conducted in that study, which I'll tell you a little bit more about. And the third study, led by my colleagues at Melbourne, Professor Anne Stein and Dr. Neda Netamadali, looked at car air fresheners and the volatile emissions that come out of those. We spend lots of time in vehicles. Many people have those small dash-mounted air fresheners. We were really curious to know what was coming out of them. And so, yeah, that's what we'll talk about now in terms of the recent studies. we've conducted. So this study here, so this was really driven by the idea that I wanted to know what it would be like in the day of a typical student, I guess, or a typical person in Melbourne if they spent 8 hours at university, then went home, and what would their daily exposure to VOCs be? So it's not easy to monitor VOCs in real time. So we did a kind of sampling called active sampling. So we sampled over a period of time and collected representative air quality. And so we were also only focusing on daytime exposure. We couldn't really take the sampling home. We could have done personal monitoring, but that wasn't within the budget or scope at the time. So we focused on using fixed locations indoors and outdoors across the university using different definitions. So we had groups of like meeting rooms, renovated offices was another category, green building rooms. I was really interested in the air quality in green buildings. Restrooms, so what we call toilets, I guess, and classrooms and campus services, which was the hairdresser and supermarket on campus at the time. So we followed US EPA compendium methods for determination of VOCs and for formaldehyde. And the analysis focused on the geometric mean and indoor-outdoor concentration ratios. So this is an example of a location indoors. You can see there's a ladder with a small pump. It's very hard to see maybe in that picture. There's a small pump here, and there's a couple of pumps here. One's measuring aldehydes, formaldehyde and other aldehydes. Now that this little small sampling media, 10x sampling media here is measuring the VOCs, or capturing, VOCs. And then afterwards we would take it back to the lab and for the VOCs, using GCMS, analyze the VOCs for character and quantity, and ultra high performance HPLC for the aldehydes. So in terms of concentrations, we actually grouped our chemicals to sum them. And I know this is a little bit unorthodox, but we focused on the hazardous pollutants in the locations, and found that in each of them you had formaldehyde levels and benzene, toluene. Summing them up gave these concentrations below. So they weren't extreme concentrations, but you can see that in terms of the highest to lowest, I guess, we had moderately high levels of the combined group. Now, it's a bit hard to compare any individual, you can compare individual VOCs to guidelines if you sampled within the guideline requirement. So the WHO have indoor air quality guidelines, which we can refer to, provided you sample within those sampling periods or sampling times. This is just an indication. I think it's looking back now, I think summing them all together is an interesting thing to do, but just gives you an idea of the different levels. So classrooms had amongst the highest levels of all of the hazardous pollutants in the group. If you look at indoor and outdoor concentration ratios, so we conducted simultaneous sampling indoors, and then usually on the roof of a building outdoors, or in a garden area, depending where we could do that. And so you can see here across the different types of locations, so restrooms, renovated offices, a green building, meeting areas, classrooms, campus services, the indoor to outdoor concentration ratios revealed that we had, many times higher formaldehyde, for instance, in a range of those locations. And so, and other compounds were, much higher indoors. So I think that's just showing that these locations, obviously the VOCs in those locations were significantly higher. For instance, in this situation here with D-limonene, in a campus service location, which was a hairdresser, the D-limonene levels were 300 plus times, 320 times higher indoors than outdoors. So again, an indication, a bit of a fingerprint. So across all of the 41 VOCs, we sampled in 20 locations. Indoor concentrations were higher in almost all cases. Formaldehyde, benzene, toluene, and xylenes were up to an order of magnitude higher indoors and outdoors. We're very lucky in Australia how outdoor concentrations of those compounds are low. So that's just something for context. So D-limonene, ethanol, and other compounds associated with indoor locations were, like, for instance, the hairdresser and the campus services were many times higher indoors and out. And if you look at the most prevalent VOCs, ethanol, D-limonene, formaldehyde, they have links to building materials, furnishings, consumer products such as air fresheners and cleaning supplies. So I guess the next stage for that work was to look at what strategies we could use to reduce potential exposure to these pollutants. So we thought of this as, again, part of my research, my PhD. So we thought about what we could do in terms of an intervention in some of the locations, which brings us to the next study. So this was really to look at how bigger improvement for indoor air quality we could see if we asked people to change practice, to go from using one source, a fragrance source with terpenes in the mixture of the detergent, to a fragrance-free source, which typically does not have terpenes. So it was motivated by the fact that exposure to emissions from dry vents in several countries, the US and Australia in particular, have found up to 12% of adults have experienced asthma attacks, migraine headaches, and similar symptoms from the exposure to dry vent emissions. So this was, I think, I've been contacted by several different groups since doing this work, and have made several presentations to different groups about it, because they're very, they might live in a large housing block, and their neighbours will use the clothes dryer, and the vent will be impacting their air quality, a bit like smoke does for residential wood burning does for people at the moment around many cities and towns in Australia. The neighbour's house has a chimney, and the smoke impacts air quality in the neighbourhood. So in similar situations, people have expressed interest in this work, because they're like, can you give us some indication of how we can help people, or maybe our neighbours, to change their practice? So I think it's been quite an interesting one to be involved, to work in that space and see the impact of it, and potentially help people with good advice, I guess, to reduce their own and their neighbours' exposure. So they're a primary source of VOCs. So this idea of a fragrance consumer product. So you've got these in every home across most parts of the world, that will just be a product for shampoo, detergent, any kind of cleaning product. And this is a thing that, as a someone who didn't know about this at the time, I was surprised that they were so prevalent, and I guess so potentially problematic. So essentially, a fragrance consumer product is a chemically formulated product with a fragrance. So air fresheners, deodorizers, laundry products, cleaning supplies. In Australia, around 98% of people use fragrance consumer products at least once a week. Now, the interesting thing is that ingredients in these products they don't have to be disclosed. There's no requirement for them to be fully disclosed. So that's sort of a bit of background, and just I guess motivation of the work. Some of the health effects reported by Professor Steinman's research on nationwide population surveys. So this was done in Australia. The survey, a nationally representative survey, found that 33% of Australians report adverse health effects from exposure to these products, the group of products I mentioned before. 1 in 3 report one or more types of health effect, from products such as air fresheners, laundry products, cleaning supplies. Even deodorants and colognes, personal care products, can trigger symptoms in some people. So this is a breakdown of some of the types of symptoms people experience. You can see respiratory and mucosal symptoms were the larger proportion of symptoms that people experienced. So when exposed to air fresheners, around 16% of Australians report some form of health issues, such as headaches, asthma attacks, and other breathing difficulties. So there's a little bit of extra context and motivation. If we focus on asthmatics specifically, Nationwide, this is a four country survey. Australia, the US, the UK, and Sweden, I believe, was the fourth country. And so 20%, 26% of people reported breathing like asthma-like conditions. So 15% had asthma-like condition. We had doctor-diagnosed asthma, 15.8%, or an asthma-like condition. That's proportionally a bit higher than what we see in Australia. At the moment, we have about 10 or 11% of the people. But I guess, you know, these people will report a symptom without actually having necessarily doctor diagnosis, but they still feel tightness in their chest. They have breathing difficulties. It's asthma-like. So just wanted to flag that those numbers are a little higher than what we would normally expect. What I know that the Asthma Australia Foundation actually reports as being the proportion of Australians who have asthma. So 57% of these people reported adverse health effects, including asthma attacks, respiratory problems, and migraine headaches from exposure to fragrance products. So from air fresheners and deodorizers, 36%. And if you look at the laundry products coming from a dryer across all four countries, it was a little bit higher than just the US and Australia. So it's interesting, I guess, the density of population and also the types of products they have in their market and the overall health of the population. All of these things play into those numbers. So we focused in this study on D-limonene. Now, that was a compound that is a commonly used fragrance product or fragrance chemical. This is an interesting chemical. It's a terpene, and terpene chemistry is extremely complicated. But in terms of just at a high level, we know it's prevalent. We know that it's a good marker for a fragrance laundry product compared to a fragrance-free product. And it's associated with a range of human health and environmental effects and classified as potentially hazardous. And it readily undergoes, readily reacts with ozone to generate a range of secondary products. This was a simulation study done several years ago, and it shows that your secondary reaction products, so your primary, you release something, you theoretically release terpenes into a chamber, and you add ozone and a certain ventilation air change rate, ozone at 20 parts per billion, and your secondary reaction products are around, you know, I guess around a fifth, but still, you know, 200 micrograms per meter cubed of particulate matter potentially, or I think you've got, yeah, the secondary products are an important consideration here. I'm actually, yeah, looking at that, just trying to work. I thought it was PM 2.5 they were actually measuring, but it might have been formaldehyde as well. I think, yeah, anyway, it's just an important thing to consider when you have ozone in the environment that is an oxidant in the air. You can potentially react with the terpenes and form secondary reaction products. This is the setup we used for the experiment. Essentially, 4 homes were the intervention homes. So we asked them to use a particular product for 4 weeks beforehand, several weeks beforehand, and then we switched and we measured the air quality in their home and in the room and out of the dry vent and outdoors, and essentially looked at the change after transitioning to a fragrance-free product. So these measurements, you can see a dust track here, Q track here measuring temperature, humidity, flow calibration, and then the sampling meter here for VOCs. So yeah, that's just the experimental setup. And the intervention was to ask them to switch over to using and essentially wash and dry their clothes as they would normally do it for 4 weeks. And then we'd return and do some measurements. If you look at this here, this will just a quick summary of the results. So we got background room air. So looking at the air quality in the room itself, looking at the samples coming out of the vent with no products, and then looking at the samples coming out of the vent with the use before and after switching products. So I've got about 15 minutes left, but I guess the important thing is these control homes were very low, very low, very low. So they were only using the fragrance-free. And if we focus on these homes before, so we had concentrations of limonene 2, 10, 2.5, and 118 in the 4 homes that were evaluated. And after switching, those concentrations dropped right down. So you get, you know, a significant reduction in the concentration of limonene in in the environment coming out of the dry vent. And if you look similarly at the background air, the background room air improved as well. The levels weren't particularly high, but yeah, I think this is the information I'd like you to focus on. So the study demonstrates that changing can significantly reduce, changing from a fragrance to a fragrance-free product is a good way to reduce concentrations of D-limonene in your home and in your from your dry vent, and also could also reduce secondary pollutants, formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, and ultrafine particles. We didn't see any clear indication of reduction of PM2.5. We didn't measure ultrafine, but we didn't see any substantial reduction in PM2.5, partly due to the humidity in the room. So I think we did collect a lot of data on the particulates, but it was a bit unconclusive. So interestingly, following on from this study, we looked at a regional area. So we looked at the city of Melbourne and said, okay, if the people in Melbourne switched from using a fragrance to a fragrance-free laundry product, how much, what benefit would there be in terms of emissions of limonene? So we looked at metropolitan Melbourne, and after switching, looked at the number of people in the city and the number of clothes dryers essentially per home, and then found that if you looked at the city before, it would probably produce the emissions from those events of drying their clothes would be around about 2 tonnes per year. And after switching from a fragrance to a fragrance-free product, it was estimated to reduce by around 1.58. So substantial reduction by switching. So that has implications for urban air quality, which I just want to touch on this study here, done in the US. And it's basically talking about the need for greater awareness around VOCs and urban air quality. Due to stricter controls on air pollution, transport-derived emissions for VOCs have decreased. So petrochemical, emissions from cars and trucks, etc. So consequently, the relative importance of the chemicals used to make pesticides, coatings, printing inks, adhesives, cleaning agents, and personal care products is increased. So looking at data from 33 industrialized cities, McDonald et al. Found that the VOCs produced now contribute to about 1/2 of all emitted VOCs. And so thinking about that, there's another important way of mitigation by managing these chemicals. If we've improved our emissions from vehicles and petrochemical use in transport, etc., we probably extended our use in fragrances and chemicals used for cleaning, etc. So it's something to be aware of. And with ozone chemistry, higher levels of VOCs, higher levels of terpenes, it can have an important implication for air quality. There's a couple of great videos and information summaries here from McDonald's work. I recommend looking at that if there's time. I won't try and play the YouTube video right now. So yeah, I think that's a quick summary of that work. So looking at air fresheners now, I mentioned I've got a few minutes left, so around 10 minutes is what I think. Tell me if I'm wrong, if you need me to stop earlier, please. So looking at the car air freshener question, we've all been in a rideshare, a taxi, or some vehicle where there's an air freshener. Sometimes that can be pleasant, I suppose, for some people, but other times it can be really difficult. And so, people write to us saying, what can I do to get people to be aware, essentially, of the fact that these air fresheners really impact how I feel. And some people will not use cabs or ride-shared Ubers. We have a lot of in Australia because of those reasons. So not a lot was known about air fresheners in cars. We looked at 12 air fresheners, and we partnered with the California Department of Public Health to do this. They have a lot of really important work being done in California around reducing exposure in workplaces, very much occupationally focused, but they have a whole range of information sheets and programs to raise awareness around personal care products, cleaning products, air fresheners, and using them in the workplace and how to respectfully use them. So Justine and Jennifer, they led some terrific work looking at a summary of 270 work-related asthma cases associated with exposure, fragrance exposure. And in I think 1993 to 2012, they were in Californian workplaces. And the 3.8% of those confirmed cases, cologne or perfume and air fresheners were the trigger. So people essentially developed work-related asthma, and that was the trigger in those cases. There were other triggers clearly, but this was an important piece of work. And they cars and settings such as Uber can be important settings for exposure. So in the similar type of analysis, GC, not thermal desorption, GCMS, but Headspace, GCMS was used for the analysis in this work, and this was done by Dr. Neda Nematalali from Melbourne University. Across the 12 air fresheners, there were 546 VOCs emitted and 275 unique identities. The most prevalent was limonene, and in natural, they looked at regular and natural air fresheners. So it's an interesting comparison to make as well, as we'll go forward and talk about. Essentially, there wasn't a great deal of difference between regular and natural. So for the 275 emitted identities, 9 VOCs were classified as potentially hazardous. So these are compounds that are known under different the United States legislation, Californian legislation, as potentially hazardous compounds or asthmagens. There was a couple that were asthmagens as well. So yeah, that's the I guess the backstory of that study. Results showed that there are every day which may expose us to potentially hazardous VOCs, and there's simple things we can do about that. So I guess the thing that concerns me and what I hear from people is that they're in a small space, and you virtually, they're fairly well sealed, so you can have quite a bit of involuntary exposure in these ride shares. So I'd just like to share in the last few minutes a couple of slides or bits of information about some current research activities we're doing. So without going into a lot of other slides, I'll just briefly talk about a study we're doing in New South Wales, which is the next state north of where I live. Sort of in the middle east of Australia, towards the right-hand side above, in wood smoke impacted communities. That study is looking at an intervention using HEPA filtration, and whether or not we know HEPA filtration improves air quality, we don't know whether it improves asthma outcomes. So we're recruiting people with asthma, and to essentially monitor their respiratory health over a period of 8 weeks during winter in wood smoke affected communities. We're measuring BTEX as a compound, a group of compounds known to be from wood smoke. So that's another study going on. We're looking at indoor VOCs in prefabricated timber buildings. And so that work here has been recently published as a review of the literature, looking at, there's not a lot of work done in this space. It's an important area of and trying to get grant money to do more sampling and analysis of VOCs in these spaces, because they're an emerging building type. I think they're an important building type. Prefab timber is a great product if it's produced well and if the building is ventilated. So I'm getting a bit of feedback. Did you want me to stop? Or?
Yeah, thank you very much. Wonderful talk. Can you hear me?
Yeah, just hear you now, Professor Shiva, is it?
Yes, yes.
Hey, I can just hear you. Thank you. Yes.
So thank you very much for the wonderful talk. Very informative on the VOCs that particularly contributing from the personal care and other products which generally uses in the household. I'm a little, surprised to see the concentrations are so high. Will there be regulations to regulate this in the manufacturing itself?
Good question, Professor Shiva. I think there are, for instance, in the materials space, there are certain voluntary guidelines people can follow for, timber products, etc. So eco-labeling, Blue Angel in Europe, various American standards and guidelines for materials. There certainly are in some countries for what can be contained in a product. The Californian Department of Health do have guidelines and restrictions around the amount of individual chemicals, particularly terpenes, because of the ozone chemistry, I think, in the airshed around areas like Los Angeles. So they're very much aware of this, but I don't think it's widely spread across the US or widely spread across the world that these products are well regulated in terms of what's in them. But I do believe the US is leading, or California is leading the world in that space. Vaping products here, we're looking at. I didn't get it. There's a paper we've just published in this, and yeah, there's no requirement to disclose the ingredients. There's no difference between regular and organic. They're not good from the start, but if you look at the chemicals in them, I think you've got to be very. It's not an alternative, a healthy alternative to cigarette smoking at all. And I think we're seeing a massive increase in vaping in our country. And there needs to be greater disclosure of what's in them and regulation of what's in them. And it's just not happened yet. They've restricted the purchase of them, but then once they've restricted the purchase, then people are going to the black market to find them. So yeah, it's air quality. Yeah, I'd encourage you to have a quick look at that article. But yeah, it's for consumer products. They're potentially the alternatives, like I mentioned, the fragrance-free alternatives offer a better end product. They still work as long as they still work as their function of cleaning. The emissions from them are generally lower, and certainly the fragrance emissions are generally lower. So I think there are some good alternatives in terms of laundry products, but I believe a lot of that is voluntary in terms of what goes in them. And yeah, there's no requirement in Australia, at least, for particular thresholds.
Thank you, Nigel. Yeah, I'm just requesting others, if you have any questions, please use chat box to, ask your questions. Yeah, Nigel, just another interesting, findings with your studies. You have just mentioned that, outdoor, VOCs that particularly coming from the transport is reducing because of the interventions. But now you are saying that there are a lot of personal care products that are being used, other activities that are happening in the urban environment, and the VOCs related from these kind of activities is increasing. My thinking is now, will go into air-conditioned buses, cars, and vehicles will contribute more exposure in terms of related to VOCs when compared to the general public who uses non-air conditioned buses.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Shiva, that's a great point. So in terms of the transition to using air-conditioned spaces, because you're more confined in them, is that what you're?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think absolutely, and in terms of COVID has driven so much research and awareness in all over the world, but definitely here in Australia. And so in terms of standards and approaches to reduce exposure to viral load in those locations, I think people, I don't know that I've seen air conditioners have fresh air intakes built into the bus at this stage, but maybe the windows might be open, but masks will be worn. People are conscious of those sorts of things in terms of the COVID protection. In terms of VOCs, really, it is about in a bus environment, it's about not taking the source of pollution, or not having if it's an air freshener, but you're probably not going to see an air freshener in a bus, but it could be a cleaning approach that the company uses. The idea of more fresh air in the bus, if possible, rather than more air-conditioned air, but I know people like to be comfortable. So yeah, I think it's a very good point you make. Yeah, thank you for that. I don't know the situation as it evolves. I think people are very COVID protective in public transport. They're very aware of that. We're still seeing some people wear masks here. But in terms of VOCs, I don't think many people are aware of it. And it doesn't impact everyone. I'd say not all. If I look at my family and friends, not everyone would even notice the VOCs as a potential irritant. Whereas I do know others who are extremely. They go to all lengths to avoid any kind of like dry vent or air freshener in a car or what it might be. But I think it's a good point.
Yeah, Nigel, and other question I've just coming to my mind is are there any biomarkers we can relate to the kind of products the households uses? Can we use some biomarkers so that they don't need to do all the measurements of all the VOCs, but can it possible to identify some biomarkers that can relate it to that these are the products that can contribute, such type of VOCs?
Yeah, so great idea. I know that, for instance, for inflammation, respiratory inflammation, you can measure exhaled nitric oxide, E&O, and there's a device we're using in the study here, in this study here. Our colleagues from the Woolcock Institute for Medical Research are measuring a range of respiratory symptoms. So in terms of biomarkers, inflammation would be one, and the E&O measurement would allow measurements to be done on people. For instance, the dry event study that we did, we could have done E&O measurements on the people in the house, provided we had ethics approval, on the people in the house before and after the intervention. That's actually a really cool idea to be able to do that and see if their inflammation marker. So while they may not have been asthmatic or had asthma, their body would have responded in some way, and there would have been an inflammation biomarker that we could have potentially looked at. And I really love that idea, Professor Shiva. So that's an example of one we could do fairly easily. Taking samples from people is always problematic, ethically, but also just practically. But doing a simple breathing test that's a Ventolin pump, but into a device and measuring an indicator for inflammation would be a great way to try and understand. Well, let's look at the prefab story. I really want to get some funding together to be able to monitor air quality in prefab timber. If we could measure inflammation, lung inflammation, as a biomarker of people who are in a prefab timber building with ventilation rate X, and then we increase the fresh air intake, and then measure the same people's inflammation biomarker. This is great. You're really giving me ideas here. So thank you. I like it.
Thank you, Nigel. Nigel, you just look at it. Are there any questions in the chat box? And sorry, I'm not able to see in my
I can't see. I'll stop sharing, shall I? Or,
I think
Shiva, may I raise a few observations?
Gupta ji, go ahead.
Sir, thank you very much, Dr. Nigel, for your excellent presentation. We have a lot of information on VOC emissions and their monitoring. But two questions come to my mind always. One is what Shiva just now mentioned, just to strengthen that point once again, that if we talk of regulations on indoor air quality parameters or things, why not have regulations on the emissions, level of emissions from different products? Because that manufacturer can easily control. And similarly, we should have regulations on building designs and other things where people reside. So if we have to have regulations, so we should have regulations on this emissions from different products, and also on the building designs, approval of building design by the municipal local authorities, so that people can live in safe houses. And another point which I wanted to make is that we have a lot of information on VOC emissions, different kind of VOCs, but we do not have enough information on how much exposure is critical or lethal to these different VOCs, and to what levels. So people can, take a decision whether to expose themselves to this kind of atmospheres for such a long time. Because intermittent exposure, I don't think would be very critical or lethal. So if we can have some information from medical experts or medical fraternity, they should advise how much exposure is safe or how much exposure is dangerous. So if we
Yes.
can get that kind of information, then it will be very helpful for the community and people by and large. These are two
Thank
of my
you.
observations which I wanted to share.
Thank you so much. Great points. I really appreciate your points and your observations. That's really helpful. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. And maybe just see that are there any questions in the chat box? So if there
I
are
couldn't
no,
see any, Professor Shiva. I couldn't see any.
yeah, thank you very much, Nigel. It is a very interesting and very useful work. I think in many countries is required, even in many places where I just noticing as the technology development, societal development, either we will it move from one pollution source to the other pollution source.
Yeah, that's it.
So
Thank
I
you,
mean,
Professor Shiva.
yeah, it's a good to see from the air quality research point of view. At least we will keep moving from one point to the address to the other point. Yeah. So just to I request Nigel. I hope everybody can start their camera. We can have one photo.
Oh, okay.
Actually, I'm joining from my my student phone, so I think I'll see everybody.
Okay, awesome. That's
Maybe
great.
let's-
Oh,
let's
hi,
open.
everyone. Wow. Where are you all calling in from? All from
I mean,
Chennai
I'm
or?
in office, but actually my computer was having some problem. So
No worries, no worries.
okay,
Okay. Thank you.
thank you, Nigel.
Alrighty. Thanks, guys. Thank you, Professor Shiva. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel, and see you sometime. So just
Well,
to
I'm
see.
coming.
Thank
I'm
you
coming
very much
over.
for joining.
I'm coming over to your country in a couple of months. So I'll see you. If you're going to indoor to healthy buildings in Hyderabad, anyone going to healthy buildings?
Yes,
We
yes,
might-
maybe I'll plan it. Actually, in fact, we were just thinking about it. I'll let you know about that. And in fact, you know that Nigel, we were planning to have our IACOCAM conference,
Oh.
which you attended. It will be in Delhi.
Oh,
in,
wow.
December. Please block it. I think we will send you an invitation now.
Thank you.
Please block your calendar and yeah, plan to come again.
That would be wonderful. Thanks so much, Professor Shiva.
Yeah. Thank you. And
Thanks,
have
everyone.
a nice
Thank
evening.
you.
Bye-bye. Yeah,
You
thank you
too.
all
Good-
for joining the meeting.
morning. Good morning.
Thank you for all your support to the air quality